My son placed his hands on me in anger, convinced I was nothing more than a fragile obstacle in his path to wealth. He believed his intimidation had silenced me forever. He was wrong. The next morning, I rose before dawn to prepare a full breakfast. But that meal was not for my family. I cooked it for the judge, who was about to ensure my son never touched a dime of my money again. My name is Evelyn Marlowe. I am 56 years old, and I have lived in the quiet town of Redmont, Wyoming, for over 3 decades. The wind here howls through the valley with a mournful sound that matches the silence inside my chest. It has been exactly 8 months since my husband, Robert, suffered a heart attack at the dinner table, leaving me alone in a house that feels too large for one person, yet too full of memories to ever leave. Since his funeral, my life has shrunk into a predictable, solitary routine. I wake up at 6 in the morning, brew a single cup of black coffee, and sit by the window watching the snow dust the pines. I keep the house exactly as Robert left it. His flannel jacket still hangs by the back door, smelling faintly of sawdust and rain. His reading glasses sit on the side table, waiting for eyes that will never open again. This order, this preservation of the past, is the only thing holding me together. My son, Gregory Marlowe, does not understand this. Gregory is 32 years old and carries himself with the arrogance of a man who has never heard the word no. He made his fortune in real estate, flipping foreclosure properties in the city and turning desperation into profit. He wears suits that cost more than my monthly heating bill and drives a silver sedan that looks like a spaceship against the rustic backdrop of our town. In the months following his father's death, Gregory stopped calling to ask how I was coping. Instead, our conversations turned into interrogations about the deed to the house, the equity in the land, and my supposed inability to manage the upkeep. He stopped being my son and started acting like a portfolio manager. Then there is Madison Hale. She is Gregory's new girlfriend, a woman with sharp features and eyes that calculate the value of everything they touch. She has only visited twice, and both times she walked through my living room with a wrinkled nose, as if the scent of old books and home-cooked meals was offensive to her delicate sensibilities. She never called me Evelyn or Mrs. Marlowe. She just referred to me as she or your mother whenever she whispered in Gregory's ear. I could feel the tension radiating off them like heat from a pavement in July, but I ignored it. I thought it was just grief manifesting as distance. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning when the illusion of family shattered. I was washing my breakfast plate when I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. It was too early for visitors. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and peered through the curtains. Gregory's car was there, gleaming aggressively in the morning sun. But he was not alone. Madison was with him, stepping out of the passenger side with a clipboard in her hand. What stopped my heart, however, was not their unexpected arrival. It was what Gregory was pulling out of the trunk. He was unloading stacks of flattened cardboard boxes, dozens of them. My stomach twisted into a knot of cold dread. I walked to the front door, my hand trembling as I reached for the knob. When I opened it, the air between us felt heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on my arms stand up. Gregory did not smile. He did not lean in to hug me. He stood at the bottom of the porch steps, holding a stack of boxes under one arm, looking at me with the detached expression of a landlord serving an eviction notice. "Gregory," I asked, my voice barely rising above a whisper. What is all this?" He walked past me without a word, his shoulder brushing mine with zero affection. Madison followed, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. She didn't even look at me. She just surveyed the hallway and made a checkmark on her clipboard. "We need to get started immediately," Madison said to the air, her voice crisp and devoid of warmth. "The truck is coming at noon." Truck. I turned to face my son, who was already setting the boxes down on the coffee table, right on top of the antique lace runner I had crocheted years ago. "Gregory, please, talk to me. What is happening?" He finally looked at me, but the warmth I used to see in his brown eyes was gone, replaced by a steeliness that chilled me to the bone. "We are helping you." "Mom," he said, his tone smooth, but laced with a threat I couldn't quite name. "We are just decluttering. You have too much junk here." "Junk," I stepped back, clutching the dish towel to my chest. "This isn't junk. This is my life. This is your father's life. It is a fire hazard." "Evelyn." Madison chimed in, walking over to the mantelpiece and picking up Robert's old pipe. She held it with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. And frankly, it's depressing. The boxes loomed in the living room like tombstones. I looked from Gregory to Madison, and then back to the boxes. The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't the comfortable silence of my mornings. It was the silence of a predator cornering its prey. I realized then that they hadn't come for coffee. They hadn't come to check on the widow. They had come to erase her. My heart hammered against my ribs as the question formed in my mind, a question no mother should ever have to ask. How does a mother become a target of her own son? "We are just going to help you get organized." "Mom," Gregory said, flashing a smile that felt practiced. It was not the warm, goofy grin of the boy who used to scrape his knees playing in the backyard. It was a tight, plastic expression that did not reach his eyes. His eyes remained cold and assessing, scanning the living room as if calculating the square footage rather than seeing his childhood home. Before I could process his words, Madison marched past me, her heels clacking loudly against the floorboards. She headed straight for the master bedroom, my breath hitched in my throat. That was my sanctuary. That was where Robert's scent still lingered on the pillows. "Madison, wait, you cannot go in there," I cried out, stepping forward to intercept her. Gregory moved faster than I expected. He stepped into my path, using his large frame to block me. He placed his hands on my shoulders. It was not a hug. It was a restraint. He applied just enough pressure to force me backward toward the floral armchair. "Mom." "Please," Gregory said, his voice dripping with a sickeningly sweet condescension. "You are getting hysterical. This is exactly why we are here. You cannot handle this anymore. Just sit down. Take a deep breath. I am not hysterical. Gregory, this is my house." I protested, but my voice trembled. The weight of his hands felt like iron bars. He pushed me down into the chair, and for a terrifying moment, I felt physically overpowered by the child I had once rocked to sleep. Then came the sound that will haunt me for the rest of my life, the sharp snap of heavy-duty industrial trash bags being shaken open. Madison emerged from the bedroom, carrying armfuls of Robert's things, his fishing journals, the small wooden box where he kept his cufflinks, the framed photograph of us from our honeymoon in Charleston. She did not ask me what I wanted to keep. She simply dropped them into the black void of the plastic bag, held open by Gregory. "Wait, no please." "Not the photos," I begged, trying to rise again. Gregory pointed a finger at me, his face hardening. Sit. Down. We are clearing out the hoarding. It is unhealthy. He reached for the mantelpiece. My heart stopped. He picked up the mahogany clock that had belonged to my grandfather. It was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship that chimed every hour. It was over 100 years old. Gregory looked at it with disdain, turning it over in his hands. This thing is broken half the time anyway, he muttered. And it is ugly. Nobody wants old junk like this cluttering up prime real estate. Gregory, do not you dare, I whispered, tears blurring my vision. He tossed it. He did not place it gently. He tossed it into the bag like it was a wrapper from a fast food burger. I heard the sickening crunch of wood and glass shattering against the other items at the bottom of the sack. Madison returned with a pile of my clothes. I recognized the silk blouse I wore to my anniversary dinner 5 years ago. I saw the wool coat I had saved up for 3 months to buy. She held the coat up by 2 fingers, wrinkling her nose. This smells like mothballs and old people. She sneered. Honestly, Evelyn, you are doing yourself a favor getting rid of these rags. You need to dress like someone who is still alive. Into the bag they went. My history, my dignity, my memories. Within 2 hours, the living room was unrecognizable. The walls were bare, the shelves were empty. The warmth had been sucked out of the room, leaving behind a hollow echo. I sat frozen in the chair, clutching the armrests until my knuckles turned white, gasping for air, as if the oxygen in the room was being packed away, too. Why are you doing this? I managed to choke out. I never asked for this. Gregory tied a knot in the final bag and dropped it with a heavy thud. He wiped his hands on his expensive trousers and looked down at me. The mask of the concerned son slipped completely, revealing something dark and terrifyingly impatient. Because, Mom, look at you, he said, his voice flat and devoid of empathy. You are a mess. You are crying over garbage. You are not lucid enough to make your own decisions anymore. The words hit me harder than a physical blow. Not lucid. Outside, the heavy rumble of a diesel engine cut through the silence. I looked out the window and saw a massive moving truck backing into the driveway. It had not been called on a whim. It had been booked days, maybe weeks, in advance. They had planned to strip my life to the bone before they even walked through the door. I sat there, small and defeated in the empty room, watching my son and his girlfriend haul away the physical evidence of my existence. I felt entirely alone. I felt invisible. But in my shock, and in their arrogance, we all forgot one thing. I forgot about the motion-activated security camera tucked discreetly between the books on the top shelf, the only shelf they had not yet cleared. It was blinking a tiny, almost invisible red light, silently witnessing every cruel word and every shattered heirloom. The morning sun did not bring warmth. It only illuminated the terrifying emptiness of my living room, exposing the dust outlines where my furniture used to be. But the true horror was waiting for me inside the glowing screen of my tablet. I logged into my bank account, my hands shaking so badly I had to tap the icon 3 times. I expected to see my savings, the $28,450 Robert and I had scraped together over 40 years of hard work. The screen refreshed. The balance read 0. I stared at the number, blinking, certain my eyes were failing me. I checked the transaction history. A single transfer had wiped the account clean at 3 a.m. The recipient was Gregory Marlowe. No. This cannot be right. I whispered to the empty room. I drove to the bank in a daze. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. When I reached the teller, a young woman named Jessica who had known me for years, I slammed the tablet onto the counter. Jessica, you have to help me. My money. It is all gone. Someone stole everything. Jessica looked at the screen, then typed something into her computer. Her expression shifted from polite to pitying. Mrs. Marlowe, please, lower your voice, she said softly, leaning in. I see the transaction here. It was authorized via the mobile app using biometric confirmation and the security PIN. The transfer went to a joint holder. Joint holder? I never made Gregory a joint holder. I cried out, and people in the line behind me began to shuffle uncomfortably. According to our records, he was added 3 months ago. You came in with him to sign the papers. Do you not remember? The memory hit me like a splash of ice water. Gregory had brought me here. He told me it was just paperwork to update my beneficiary information in case something happened. He had held my hand, smiled that charming smile, and guided my pen. He had set up the fingerprint ID on my phone for my convenience because my arthritis made typing passwords difficult. It was not convenience. It was a key. I called Gregory right there in the lobby. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. He stole it, Jessica. He tricked me. Mrs. Marlowe. The branch manager stepped in, placing a hand on my shoulder. Perhaps you should go home and rest. These disputes are often just misunderstandings within the family. We cannot reverse an authorized transaction. They thought I was senile. They thought I was a confused old woman who forgot she gave her son her life savings. I left the bank and drove straight to the police station. I sat across from a tired-looking officer, explaining that my son had looted my house and now my bank account. The officer sighed and closed his notebook. Ma'am, without proof of theft, this is a civil matter. You admitted he had a key to the house. The bank says he is on the account. Unless you can prove he held a gun to your head, there is nothing we can do. So, he can just take everything, I asked, my voice trembling. He can just erase me. You should contact a civil attorney, the officer said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. I walked out of the station, my legs feeling like lead. The world was spinning. I could not breathe. I collapsed onto the curb right there on the street, ignoring the dirt ruining my skirt. I buried my face in my hands, gasping for air. I was penniless. My home was empty. My son was a thief, and nobody believed me. I sat there for 10 minutes, trying to find the will to stand up. As I lifted my head to wipe my eyes, a flash of blue caught my attention. It was the truck, the same massive moving truck from yesterday. It was parked 2 blocks down, idling in front of a brick building. I squinted, reading the sign above the door, Redmont Notary and Legal Services. My stomach churned. Why would they be at a notary? I pushed myself up and walked toward the building, staying in the shadows of the awnings. As I got closer, the door to the office opened. Madison walked out. She looked impeccable in a sharp beige suit, sunglasses shielding her eyes. She was holding a thick manila folder tight against her chest. She paused to adjust her grip, and for a split second, the folder turned toward me. The bold, black marker writing on the tab was unmistakable. Evelyn Marlowe, Competency and Guardianship. I froze. The breath left my lungs in a sharp hiss. This was not just about the money. This was not just about the furniture. They were not just stealing my past. They were signing away my future. Madison. I screamed her name, forcing my tired legs to move faster across the pavement. She stopped near the door of her car, turning slowly to face me. She did not look frightened or guilty. Instead, she looked at me with the same mild annoyance one might feel toward a stray dog begging for scraps. She clutched the folder tighter against her chest, shielding the label from my view. But I had already seen it. "What is in that folder?" I demanded, breathless and shaking. I saw my name. "Why do you have legal papers with my name on them?" Madison sighed, adjusting her sunglasses. She took a step closer to me, invading my personal space. Up close. She smelled of expensive vanilla perfume and cold ambition. "Evelyn, you really should not be wandering around town in this state," she said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly gentle whisper. "You look disheveled. People are starting to talk." "Stop gaslighting me. What are you and Gregory doing?" She smiled, a small, tight curvature of her lips that made my blood run cold. "We are protecting you from yourself. Gregory loves you very much. He knows you cannot handle your affairs anymore. Evelyn, you should rest. The law will soon help you do the right thing." Before I could grab her arm, she slipped into the car and locked the door. I watched helplessly as she drove away, leaving me standing on the sidewalk with my heart pounding in my ears. I turned back to the notary office and barged inside. The receptionist looked up, startled. "That woman who just left," I said, pointing at the door. She had a file with my name on it. "Evelyn Marlowe. I want to know what she notarized." The receptionist looked at me, then at my stained clothes and wild hair. She stiffened. "I am sorry, ma'am. Client confidentiality prevents us from discussing any transactions. Unless you are the client who signed the document, I cannot help you. But it is about me. They are stealing my life. Please leave, or I will have to call the police," she said, her hand hovering over the phone. I stumbled back out into the harsh sunlight. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture so grotesque I wanted to vomit. This was not just a robbery. Gregory did not just want the money in my savings account or the antique clock on the mantelpiece. This was a calculated legal maneuver. They were filing for a conservatorship. I stood there, paralyzed by the realization. If they succeeded, Gregory would become my legal guardian. He would control my finances, my health care, and my residence. He could sell my house without my permission. He could put me in a state-run facility, and I would have no legal standing to object, because, in the eyes of the law, I would be no different than a child. He was trying to strip me of my personhood. I spent the next 3 hours driving to the homes of people I thought were my friends. I knocked on the door of Sarah, a woman I had known for 20 years. When she opened the door, she did not invite me in. She looked at me with guarded eyes. "Evelyn." "Gregory called us," Sarah said, holding the door firmly. "He told us about your episodes. He said you have been forgetting things, becoming aggressive. He is lying." "Sarah." "He emptied my bank account. He said you were giving your money away to scammers, and he had to secure it." Sarah replied, shaking her head. "Honestly, Evelyn, maybe you should listen to him. He is a good son to take on such a burden." She closed the door in my face. It happened 2 more times. Gregory had poisoned the well. He had painted a narrative of my decline long before he made his move. Defeated, I returned to my neighborhood. I saw Mr. Henderson an 80-year-old retired mechanic, watering his lawn. He saw the look on my face and turned off the hose. I told him everything, desperate for just one person to believe me. He listened, his face growing grim. "Conservatorship," he muttered, spitting on the ground. "My cousin went through that. Her daughter took everything. House, pension, social security checks. If they get guardianship, your life is over." I sat on my front porch steps as the sun began to set. I had no money. I had no allies. I had no proof. It was my word against the word of a wealthy, successful businessman and his polished girlfriend. Any outburst I made would just be used as evidence of my instability. I buried my face in my hands, sobbing quietly. I was trapped. Then, through the blur of tears, I looked through the living room window. The house was empty, stripped bare of all furniture. But high up in the corner, nestled on the top shelf of the built-in bookcase, something glinted. The bookshelf. They had not cleared the bookshelf yet. My breath caught in my throat. I remembered the motion-activated nanny cam I had bought 2 years ago to watch the cat when we went on vacation. I had hidden it between the encyclopedias. I never took it down. I scrambled up the steps, my heart racing with a sudden, violent hope. If the battery was still charged, if the Wi-Fi had not been cut, it had been recording. It had seen Gregory throw the clock. It had seen Madison's cruelty. It had heard every word of their conspiracy. I rushed to my laptop, my fingers fumbling with the cord of the small security camera. I plugged it in, praying for a miracle. The device hummed, and a window popped up on the screen asking for a password I could not remember. I tried every combination of birthdays and anniversaries I knew, but the screen only flashed red. Access denied. Panic began to rise in my chest like a floodwater. I found a customer support number on the back of the device and dialed it with trembling hands. "I am sorry, ma'am." The voice on the other end droned after I explained my situation. "To retrieve archived footage from the cloud without a password. We need to verify your identity with a credit card on file. There is a service fee of $150 for a manual reset. I do not have a credit card right now." I stammered, tears stinging my eyes. My son froze my accounts. "Please? This is an emergency. I need that footage. I cannot bypass the payment screen." "Ma'am, have a nice day." The line went dead. I stared at the black screen of the laptop, the reflection of my tear-streaked face mocking me. I was holding the evidence in my hands, yet I was powerless to use it. I was going to lose everything because I could not pay a service fee. Then, a sharp knock on the front door made me jump. My heart hammered against my ribs. Had Gregory come back? Had he remembered the camera I considered hiding in the closet? But the knock came again, firm and authoritative. I crept to the peephole. It was a uniform, but not the police. It was Officer Laramie Coyle, the senior technician for the private security firm that monitored our neighborhood. He came once a year to test the perimeter alarms. I had completely forgotten today was the scheduled maintenance date. I opened the door, and the look on Laramie's face shifted instantly from professional courtesy to confusion. He looked over my shoulder into the hallway. "Mrs. Marlowe, I am here for the annual sensor check," he said, taking off his cap. Are you moving?" I did not see a work order for a disconnect. He stepped inside and stopped dead. He looked at the bare walls, the dust outlines where the grandfather clock used to stand. and the single folding chair I had dragged into the living room. "Mrs. Marlowe," Laramie said, his voice dropping an octave. "Where is your furniture? Where are your things?" I looked at this man, a man who had fixed my faulty window sensor during a blizzard 3 years ago, a man who always asked about Robert. I could not hold it in anymore. The dam broke. They took it. I sobbed, collapsing onto the folding chair. Gregory and his girlfriend. They took everything. They emptied my bank account. They are trying to say I am crazy. Laramie. They are going to put me away. Laramie listened. He did not interrupt. He did not look at his watch. He did not look at me with pitying eyes like the bank teller or the police officer. He looked at me with a growing intensity that I realized was anger. When I finished explaining about the camera and the password, he set his jaw. "Show me," he said. He sat on the floor with his back against the wall, opening his rugged field laptop. He took the camera from my hands. "I do not need a credit card." "Mrs. Marlowe," he said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "I have administrator access to the hardware. If it recorded, I will find it." Minutes passed in agonizing silence. Then, Laramie hit a key. "Got it," he whispered. He turned the screen toward me. The video file loaded. The timestamp was from yesterday morning. The image was crisp and clear. We watched in silence as Gregory and Madison moved through my house like locusts. But it was the audio that made my blood run cold. On the screen, Madison was wrapping my silver tea set in newspaper. "Do you think the judge will buy the dementia story without a doctor's note?" she asked. Gregory, standing near the doorway, laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. "I am texting myself from her phone right now," he said, holding my cell phone up to the camera's view. "I am sending a bunch of gibberish and threats. I will show it to the court. I will say she was sundowning and got violent. By the time we get the emergency guardianship, I will have power of attorney over the estate. We can list the house next week." I gasped, covering my mouth. Laramie hit the pause button, freezing the image of my son holding my phone. A smirk plastered on his face. "That is a felony," Laramie said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "That is fraud, theft, and conspiracy. And we have them on tape admitting to it." He looked up at me, his eyes fierce. "Mrs. Marlowe, I am going to download every second of this to an encrypted drive. Then I'm going to call my brother-in-law. He is not a civil lawyer. He is a shark who specializes in elder abuse cases. He hates bullies." I looked at the screen, then at Laramie. For the first time in 24 hours, the crushing weight on my chest lifted. I was not a helpless old woman anymore. I was a mother with the truth in her hands. "Do it," I said, wiping my face. "Let us get to work." The office of Marcus Holloway was not located in a glass skyscraper downtown, but in a renovated brick building on the edge of the historic district. The moment I stepped inside, the smell of old paper and fresh coffee grounded me. Laramie had driven me there in his work van, and he stayed by my side as we sat across from Marcus. Marcus was a man in his late 50s, with greying temples and eyes that seemed to see right through the surface of things. He did not offer empty platitudes. He simply plugged in the drive Laramie had prepared and pressed play. For 20 minutes, the only sound in the room was the hum of the computer fan and the recorded voices of my son and his girlfriend plotting my demise. I watched Marcus's face closely. He did not wince. He did not gasp. His expression hardened into something sharp and dangerous, like a blade being honed. When the video ended, Marcus leaned back in his chair and took off his glasses. He looked at me, then at Laramie. "This is not a misunderstanding." "Evelyn," Marcus said, his voice low and controlled. "This is a conspiracy. They are not just trying to take your money. They are attempting to strip you of your civil rights through constructive fraud. If we do not act immediately, they will succeed." "What do I need to do?" I asked, my hands gripping the armrests of the chair to stop them from shaking. "First, we need to kill their narrative," Marcus replied, pulling a legal pad toward him. "They are building a case that you are mentally incompetent. We need to prove them wrong before they even step into a courtroom. I have already called Dr. Aris, a forensic psychiatrist. She is waiting for you now. I want a full cognitive evaluation. Today." The next 4 hours were a blur of tests. I sat in a quiet, sterile room answering questions, solving puzzles, and recounting the events of the last week. I was terrified that maybe, just maybe, Gregory was right. Maybe I was slipping. But when Dr. Aris came out with the results, she was smiling. "Evelyn, your cognitive function is not just normal. It is above average for a woman of your age," she said, handing the sealed report to Marcus. "You are fully oriented, lucid, and capable. Anyone claiming otherwise is fabricating evidence." Armed with that report, we returned to Marcus's office. The atmosphere had shifted. We were no longer on the defensive. Marcus began typing furiously, drafting motions that would land like bombs on Gregory's doorstep. "We are filing an emergency petition," Marcus explained without stopping his typing. "We are suing Gregory and Madison for conversion of property, fraud, and elder abuse. But that is just the start. I am petitioning the court to freeze Gregory's assets immediately pending the investigation. If he transferred your money to his accounts, those accounts are now tainted funds." "Freeze his money?" I asked, a strange sensation blooming in my chest. It felt like the first breath of air after being held underwater. "Everything," Marcus said, hitting the enter key with a satisfying snap. "We are also filing for a temporary restraining order. They cannot come within 500 feet of you or your property. If they do, they go to jail." For the first time since Robert died, I felt a spark of power. I was not just a widow. I was not just a victim. I was the plaintiff. As we walked out of the office, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I checked my phone, which I had kept on silent all day. The screen lit up with notifications. 3 missed calls from Gregory, 5 text messages from Madison, 4 more missed calls from Gregory. I opened the text messages. The tone had shifted dramatically from their earlier arrogance. "Mum, where are you? We are worried. Call me back. Evelyn, we need to finish the paperwork for the house listing. Stop playing games. Mom, why is my bank card declined?" "Pick up the phone." I stared at the screen, reading the panic between the lines. They knew. Somewhere. A notification had popped up on Gregory's phone telling him his accounts were locked. The predator was suddenly realizing he had stepped into a trap. "Should I answer?" I asked Laramie, holding up the phone. Laramie looked at the desperate messages and shook his head. "No. Let them sweat. Everything they send now is just more evidence for Marcus." I looked at the phone one last time, seeing Gregory's name flash on the screen again as another call came through. My thumb hovered over the decline button. You do not own me. Gregory, I whispered to the device. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then I slipped the phone back into my pocket and got into Laramie's van. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the heavy, satisfying silence of the calm before the storm. 4 days after Marcus filed the motions, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. I was a prisoner in my own home, watching the street through the blinds, waiting for the inevitable blowback. It came at 3 in the afternoon. Gregory's engine roared as he slammed on the brakes outside. He did not bother knocking. He hammered on the solid oak door, the loud, desperate thump, thump, thump echoing through the empty rooms. I walked to the door, keeping the deadbolt firmly in place. I did not open it. "Mum, open this door right now," Gregory shouted, his voice hoarse with rage. "What is this? What have you done to my accounts? I cannot access anything. You have to stop this. You need to talk to Marcus." "Gregory," I replied, my voice steady, though my heart was thrashing against my ribs. "Marcus. Who is Marcus?" "Some opportunist who is preying on you." He yelled, "You are being manipulated by outsiders. Mom, you are confused. I am your son, Emma. We need to fix this before it gets worse." I felt a brief flicker of pity for his desperation, but the memory of the shattered grandfather clock and the empty bank account extinguished it. "You already made it worse. Gregory," I said quietly, "you need to leave." That was the line that broke him. His rage exploded. He shoved his entire body against the door, making the frame shudder. I quickly pulled the deadbolt back and opened the door just a crack, just enough to speak through the narrow gap. "I am calling the police if you do not step away from my property right now." In an instant, he saw the opening. He slammed his hand into the crack, pinning the door open with terrifying force. He reached through the gap and seized my left wrist. His fingers, strong and thick, wrapped around the fragile bones of my hand and squeezed. The pain was immediate and searing. "You think you can fight me?" he hissed, his face pressed against the gap, his eyes wild. "You think you can beat me in court? I will ruin you. Just drop the lawsuit." "Mum, tell them you made a mistake." He was not hitting me, but the sheer, coercive force of his grip, the pressure, the threat, the power over my body was the most violent thing he had ever done. His hands were on me, not in a moment of love or sorrow, but in a final, naked attempt to dominate and frighten me into submission. I gasped, unable to scream, feeling the blood drain from my fingers. Let go of me. Gregory. I managed to choke out. Just then, the familiar crunch of tires on gravel sounded. Laramie Coyle, driving his unmarked security sedan, had arrived for a routine welfare check. He jumped out of the car the moment he saw Gregory struggling with the door. "Hey, back away from the property now," Laramie yelled, jogging toward us. Gregory released my wrist instantly, his eyes widening in panic. He tried to compose himself, backing down the porch steps. "This is a family matter, officer." Gregory spat, straightening his tailored jacket. "I was just checking on my mother." "Putting your hands on her is not checking on her," Laramie retorted, standing between Gregory and the porch. "There is an ex parte order of protection in place. Mr. Marlowe, you are in violation of a court order. Leave now, or I call the sheriff." Gregory glared at me one last time, his eyes burning with hatred, before stalking back to his car. He squealed out of the driveway, leaving me trembling on the floor behind the closed door. Laramie immediately documented the deep bruise already forming around my wrist. The photograph of the red, Angry marks on my skin went straight to Marcus, who promised to use the incident to increase the legal protection for me. Later that evening, Gregory sent one final chilling text message. "You will regret this. When I am done, you will wish you had just let me help you." I sent the screenshot directly to Marcus. But Gregory was not done with his public display of spite. I received an alert from an old neighbor that Madison had posted an entire album on a local online marketplace. The images showed Robert's beloved hunting gear, my Persian rugs, and my mahogany desk, all tagged with ridiculously low prices. She was selling my life piece by piece, humiliating me publicly. The public exposure, however, worked against them. A day later, I received an encrypted email. The sender was an attorney named Mr. Jensen, who represented 3 other elderly men in the city. The email was short and devastating. "We have been tracking Madison Hale for 18 months. She has a pattern. She targets wealthy widowers or elderly single men, gains access to their finances via charm or deceit, and then prepares guardianship papers. The last 3 cases were dismissed before trial because the victims lacked video proof. Your video, Mrs. Marlowe, is the smoking gun we needed." Marcus was ecstatic. This proves premeditation. She is a professional predator, and Gregory is her complicit fool. We are adding federal fraud charges. The next morning, Marcus called me. "Evelyn," he said, his voice ringing with confidence. "The judge has reviewed the preliminary evidence, your competency report, the video, and the assault report from Officer Coyle. They have scheduled the first preliminary hearing, when in 2 days. Get ready. The fight begins." I entered the courtroom with Marcus Holloway by my side. I wore a simple navy dress, pressed and clean. I felt a core of steel in my chest. I was nervous, but the fear had been replaced by a quiet, fierce resolve. Across the room sat Gregory, immaculate in a suit that must have cost at least $4,000, radiating cocky confidence. Beside him, Madison was dressed in soft beige, looking demure and suitably concerned. Occasionally patting Gregory's hand for the benefit of the judge, Gregory's high-priced attorney, Mr. Thorne, delivered a smooth, oily opening statement about the duties of a devoted son protecting his elderly mother from financial ruin and cognitive decline. Madison gave the judge a tearful glance, designed to melt granite. Then Marcus stood up. He did not waste a single moment on pleasantries. "Your Honor?" Marcus said, his voice ringing clearly across the quiet room. "The defense will claim this is a misunderstanding rooted in love and concern. The evidence will prove it is a calculated, criminal attempt to commit elder abuse and constructive fraud." He walked over to a large monitor placed near the jury box and connected Laramie's encrypted drive. The camera footage began to play. Projected large enough for the entire courtroom, the judge, the clerks, the lawyers, and the small handful of public observers to see. The air in the room thickened immediately. They watched Gregory and Madison moving through my empty house. They heard the clatter of Robert's inherited clock being tossed into the garbage bag. They watched Madison sneer while tossing away my cherished belongings. Then came the audio that made Gregory's face turn ashen. On the screen, Madison was seen holding a piece of paper. The words were unmistakable. "Do you think the judge will buy the dementia story without a doctor's note?" The camera focused on Gregory. "Who was fiddling with my phone?" He laughed that cruel, hollow sound and said, "I am texting myself from her phone right now. I will say she was sundowning and got violent. We can use the fake psych certificate if we need it. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Madison shot out of her chair, her mask shattering instantly. "That is doctored, Your Honor. This video is inadmissible," she shouted. The judge, a severe-looking woman named Judge Riker, slammed her gavel down once. Hard. "Ms. Hale, sit down. One more interruption, and you will be escorted out and held in contempt." "Is that clear?" Madison collapsed back into her chair, trembling, her face a mask of scarlet fury. Gregory's attorney, Mr. Thorne, scrambled to regain control. "Your Honor." My client was stressed. He was expressing frustration. He only meant that he needed to protect her assets from her erratic behavior. The judge simply stared at Gregory, her expression unreadable. Gregory, looking desperate, leaned into the microphone. "Mom, I was just trying to help you," he pleaded, aiming his words at me. "You would not listen. You were giving money away. I did it for your own good." Marcus was ready. "Your Honor, helping your mother does not involve selling her heirlooms online for a fraction of their value, as documented in the attached exhibits. Nor does helping include the act of physical intimidation." Marcus clicked a button. The large screen changed from the video to a high-resolution photograph of my wrist, taken by Laramie Coyle, displaying the deep red-purple bruising left by Gregory's fingers only 3 days before. The silence that followed was absolute. Gregory stared at the image, then at his own hands, then down at the floor. The image of the powerful, calculated businessman was replaced by a terrified little boy caught in a terrible lie. Judge Riker picked up her pen. She wrote for a full minute, then looked directly at Gregory and Madison. "Mr. Marlowe, Ms. Hale," she said, her voice heavy with distaste. "The evidence presented clearly demonstrates that the petition for guardianship was not filed in the interest of Evelyn Marlowe's well-being, but for the purpose of financial gain and personal control. The testimony and evidence, specifically the video recording and the photographic proof of assault, indicate premeditation and malice." She put her pen down. "The petition for a conservatorship is denied, permanently and with prejudice." A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it nearly brought me to my knees. But the judge was not finished. "Furthermore," she continued, her gaze sweeping the room, "due to the evidence of theft, conversion of property, and criminal elder abuse, I am ordering the court clerk to transmit the entirety of this record, including the video evidence and the reports of physical assault, to the district attorney's office for immediate review and the filing of criminal charges." Gregory's mouth dropped open. Madison let out a strangled cry. They had prepared for a civil fight, for a simple denial, but they had walked into a criminal investigation. The truth, finally exposed in the light of the courtroom, was a blinding, suffocating thing. The criminal proceedings moved swiftly after Judge Riker's referral. Faced with the undeniable video evidence, the assault report, and the proof of Madison's 3 previous fraud cases, Gregory's defense attorney advised him that a trial would be devastating. He chose to plead guilty. On the day of the sentencing, Gregory stood before the court, no longer the arrogant son in the expensive suit, but a broken man facing the consequences of his greed. He pled guilty to charges of felony conversion of assets and criminal elder abuse. Madison, however, had fewer options. Due to her documented history of targeting elderly victims across state lines, the district attorney's office charged her with federal fraud and conspiracy to commit grand larceny. She had tried to fight, But the camera footage and the testimony from her 3 previous victims were insurmountable. When the sentences were read, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. For Gregory Marlowe, the judge issued a strong verdict: long-term probation, a period of 3 years, requiring him to report weekly and undergo mandated counseling. Crucially, the court ordered full restitution of every penny stolen from my savings, including the fees I had paid to Marcus, plus an additional $50,000 in emotional and punitive damages. He was forbidden from contacting me or setting foot within a 1,000-foot radius of my property. For Madison Hale, the sentence was much harsher. Her history of predation meant she received jail time. The judge emphasized that she was a systemic threat to the vulnerable population, and she was sentenced to a term of 3 years in a federal penitentiary. Finally, the judge addressed my home, the empty shell that had been the center of the conflict. The residents of Evelyn Marlowe shall be granted the highest level of court protection, the judge declared. No lien, sale, or transfer of ownership can be executed on this property without direct review from this court. Mrs. Marlowe, your home is safe. It was over. The justice was final, precise, and absolute. As the court adjourned, Gregory walked quickly toward me, his face pale and etched with panic and regret. Marcus moved to block him, but Gregory slipped past, putting his hands out in a gesture of pathetic appeal. "Mom, please," he choked out, his voice cracking. "I am so sorry. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I was foolish. Madison manipulated me. I hope one day we can fix this." I looked at him, not with the visceral pain of a few days ago, but with a cold, clear detachment. The man standing before me was not my son. He was a stranger who had tried to erase my life for profit. All the love I had held for him was gone, replaced by a terrible, empty clarity. I spoke only one sentence, my voice calm, flat, and absolute. "My kindness is no longer for you." I watched the light drain from his eyes, the exact moment he realized that the legal sentence was nothing compared to the lifetime banishment I had just imposed. He turned away, his shoulders slumped, accepting the finality of the severing. Moments later, a female marshal clicked the handcuffs onto Madison Hale's wrists. Madison walked past me, spitting a hateful glare my way, but I met it with my own steady, unafraid gaze. As she was escorted out through the side door, we could hear a muffled roar from the street where Laramie had gathered a small group of supportive neighbors and local news reporters. The sound was a mixture of condemnation and vindication, the community finally seeing the predator brought to heel. Laramie Coyle clapped me gently on the shoulder. "You did it, Evelyn?" he said, his face beaming with pride. "You fought them, and you won. You saved your life." Marcus Holloway, who had only ever looked stern and analytical, offered a genuine smile. "This is a landmark case. Evelyn, you stood up for every vulnerable person in this state. Now, let us go home. It is time to start your life over." I nodded, feeling the sun on my face as I walked out of the courthouse. The fight had ended, and the battlefield was clear. The tears were gone, the fear was gone, and the terrible weight of betrayal was finally lifted. I was ready to walk into the new life I had just fought to reclaim. The court verdict did not magically bring back Robert's old clock or my savings, but it gave me back something infinitely more valuable, the key to my own life. I moved back into the house immediately. The emptiness that had once symbolized loss now felt like a clean slate. I did not rush to fill it with expensive replicas. Instead, I went to a local discount store and bought a few sturdy, functional items, a comfortable armchair for $90, a small kitchen table, and a colorful rug. The house was now filled with things that served me, not memories that shackled me. My new life was anchored by the unexpected friendships I had forged in the fires of betrayal. Laramie Coyle, the security technician who became my savior, stopped by every week just to check on the alarm and ended up staying for coffee. Marcus Holloway, my lawyer, called often, not about the case, but just to talk about gardening or the weather. They were the family I had chosen, built not on blood, but on loyalty and shared conviction. I poured my energy into purpose. I joined a local women's support group for victims of elder financial abuse, sitting there, in a circle of women who had also been manipulated by trusted children or opportunistic caregivers. I realized my story was not unique. I told them about Gregory and Madison, about the video, and about the fear. I fought them with their own rules. I told the group, my voice strong and unwavering. They called me crazy, so I got a doctor to prove I was sane. They tried to take my house, so I got a judge to protect it. My story became a beacon for those who felt powerless. The betrayal was an open wound, but sharing it was how I began to heal. 6 weeks after the sentencing, a letter arrived. It was from Gregory. I recognized his neat, slanted handwriting immediately. I opened it and read his desperate apology, his assurances that he was truly sorry, and his hope that one day I might let him back into my life. I sat with the letter in my hand for a long time. There was no anger, no sadness, just quiet contemplation. I did not write back. I did not need to. The ultimate truth I had learned from this battle was this: love, true love, should never require you to sacrifice your dignity or your autonomy. I was finally free from the obligation to suffer for his sake. Then came the morning I had waited for. The sun streamed through the kitchen window, bathing the room in soft, golden light. I went to the stove and cooked a full breakfast. I prepared it with meticulous care: 2 eggs, over easy, just right, 2 slices of thick, toasted sourdough bread slathered with butter, and a mug of strong, fresh coffee. It was a perfect meal. I placed the plate carefully into a small basket, tucked a napkin over it, and walked out the door. That breakfast was not for Gregory, who was sitting under the scrutiny of his probation officer 1,000 miles away. It was a gift of gratitude. I took it down to the courthouse and asked the bailiff to deliver it, along with a simple, handwritten card to Judge Riker's chambers. The card read, "Thank you for giving me my life back." I returned home, feeling lighter than I had in years. I stood on the porch, looking at the 2 white columns of the house that Robert and I had built together. I put my hand on the doorknob, turning it slowly. I closed the door behind me, gently, definitively, and locked the deadbolt. I leaned back against the cool wood of the door, taking a deep, restorative breath, and whispered to the quiet space, "My life is mine now, and only mine." Thank you all so much for listening to Evelyn's true story of courage and resilience right here on Grandma's Family Diary. We are incredibly grateful you spent this time with us. Let us know in the comments where you are listening from today, and what Evelyn's fight taught you about standing up to betrayal. Don't forget to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash the hype button so this story of justice can be heard by even more people.